So I'm going to be talking about how I spent the last 26, almost 27 years of my life. Seems longer somehow, but it was a long time. And about golden eagles and other things, and how this story has unfolded over the last 25 years and continues to unfold, because we are envisaging this as a 50-year project. So we're just over halfway through. And I think it demonstrates the importance of time in biological studies. The most important thing is time. So many studies last for a summer, or a couple of weeks, or a year, and it's not enough time. You have no idea what normal or average is, and they're very elusive conflicts even after 25 years, I can assure you. And I remember talking at a conference a number of years ago, saying, and I showed a chart, I may show it to you tonight, whereas the first 2 years, it was just, the data didn't mean anything. There was no context, we were still learning our trade, and you both basically throw out the first 2 years of data. And this is true of almost every study. And then I pointed out that 95% of all biological studies in Canada last for less than 2 years. So you can draw your own conclusions on that. Maybe we will slow learners, but we still learn. So 25 years, and it worked. So I'd just like to acknowledge our long association with the University of Calgary. I think it's called something else now, wildlife ecology, geology, real beer, or something like that. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, or consolidating. But we have had a good, fruitful, both scientific and interpersonal relationship with members of the faculty, and that continues. And then acknowledgement, I won't go through them all, there's a lot of pictures in here. The good ones are by these people, the rest of it by me. So let's talk a little bit about the subject of this talk, which is the golden eagle, Aquila chrysitos, one of the most charismatic birds of prey. It's part of the avian part of the charismatic megafauna. Everywhere where golden eagles occur, they become part of the folklore and religion, and part of the actual people that they associate with, whether it be in North America or in Europe or in Mongolia. They are iconic birds. I mean, they're totemic birds. They are really important to us at a visceral, cultural level. In North America, the eagles, both the bald eagle and the golden eagle, are in many cultures the intercessionary force between the Great Spirit and the peoples of Turtle Island. In Rome, the Roman Empire was conquered under the eagle standard. In Christian mythology, the eagle is the symbol of the resurrection. In Anglican churches, the Bible is read from the back of a brass eagle. There's so many cultural associations with human beings and this bird. But when it comes down to it, it's a big bird of prey, eats things, kills things, and its closest relatives are the soaring birds like the red-tailed hawk or the Swainson's hawk. They're really very large buteo, buzzard hawks. Not at all closely related to the bald eagle. They're both called eagles, but all over the world, any large bird of prey can be called an eagle, even though they have no phylogenetic relationship, except very, very distantly. And the bald eagles are most closely related to the old world vultures, and they're mainly fish eaters, whereas the golden eagle is mainly a small mammal eater, specializing in things like snowshoe hares and ground squirrels, deer. We've seen them attacking deer and mountain goats and bighorn sheep. Not always successfully, but sometimes they try it on. And when you're the king of the birds, you can do anything you like. And I'm just going to start off with some pictures, a little bit about their breeding biology, taken by my friend David Atfield, who spent a career studying breeding golden eagles in Grand Valley, west of Cochrane. And these are his photographs. There's the nest, which can weigh anything up to about 1,000 kilograms. So most of them are cliff nesters. Occasionally they will nest in this case, a lightning-topped Douglas fir, but it has to be a pretty good substrate to hold it. The nest weighs about as much as a Honda Civic car, just by comparison. And there's the nest. And these are resident birds, as we'll see and I'll discuss. A lot of the population in the southern part of this range are non-migratory. And in fact, until recently it was assumed that virtually all the birds were sedentary. They may move a little bit, but not a lot. And that was the general model, and we'll come on to that. But here's the nest. Whoops, the pointer, there we go. The female generally lays 2 eggs, lays them about 48 hours apart, then starts incubating. She incubates for about 41 days. It's a very long process. And one egg will hatch usually a day or two before the other one. 2 chicks are usually produced, and usually within a week the first hatched bird will peck the second one to death. The second one's just a spare. And usually there's only enough food within a home range to support the 2 adults and one. Occasionally both survive. And generally that's when the second bird hatched is a female, which is going to be larger than the male. The females are anything up to about 30% bigger than the males. As is true with all birds of prey, including owls, the females are larger, which is unusual in birds as a whole. And there she is sitting on the nest. The female does all of the sitting. The male very, very rarely incubates. It does happen, but not very often. But the male is, well, first of all, before they breed, they have to have a courtship. There's courtship displays, sky dancing. They dance over the sky in great sort of arcs. It's very, very spectacular. And at all our observation sites, we see that in the spring. We see the birds displaying. But most importantly, the male has to present food to the female. And this is true of nearly all birds of prey. It's a food presentation, almost like a ritual. But it's more important than that. It shows, A, that there's food around, and that the male is a good provider. And humans do the same thing, except we don't present the females with ground squirrels, or some of us might, but bunches of flowers and smart, fast European sports cars if you're lucky. And what it's saying is the same thing. Stick by me, baby, I'm a great provider. And if this operation fails, and it does regularly, and probably did this last breeding season, they don't breed. And I'll talk about that when I come to snowshoe hare cycles. But eventually the bird fledges. This is the spotty teenage years of the magnificent golden eagle, still in its down underwear. This is probably about 25 days from fledging. And the fledging process itself takes about 2 months. It's a very, very long process. And eventually the young bird emerges. You can see all the insects here. A raptor nest is a midden. It's not a pleasant place to be on a hot day. Lots of insects. And this is incidentally why they so-called decorate their nests with conifer boughs. Because there are phenols in conifers. I mean, we use them for toilet cleaners and insecticides. And they are natural insecticides. It actually keeps the mites and the ticks down in the nest. It's not just that the nest looks pretty, it has a very practical reason. And then the bird emerges, and the first thing they do is go on a branch. It's called the branching phase. And all of a sudden, this great stable platform, which has been their world, is reduced to a little branch, and they really don't know what to do. They're all over the place. They're sort of balancing like tightrope walkers after a couple of beers. And they sometimes just flip upside down and hang like a bat and try to figure out what has happened to them. But they do eventually take to the wing, and they start their lifelong agon with ravens. But you can see the difference in the size. The raven is largest songbird in the world actually, which is completely dwarfed by this juvenile golden eagle. And one of the great joys of being at the observation site, even if nothing much is happening, is just to watch the continuous battle between ravens and eagles. And the ravens just get a kick out of annoying the eagles. They would just go up, and the eagle gets annoyed and sort of takes a big circle and a swipe with a talon, and the raven, which is much more manoeuvrable, just barrel rolls away and sort of thumbs its beak. And this is I took this in about mid-1970s when I was doing geological mapping up in the Richardson Mountains in northern Yukon, northern Northwest Territories. And this is an Arctic nest. There are no trees there, so these are all cliff nesters. Here's the two chicks again. But there's no conifers, but the nest is still decorated with Arctic birch, dwarf birch. And there's no ground squirrels being brought into the nest, but these are Arctic ground squirrels. So the same basic ecology, just different species involved. And this is, as it turns out, where most of the migratory birds are breeding, which is in Alaska and the Yukon. And this is the range of the golden eagle. It has a very extensive circumpolar boreal range, all the way from Scotland. The Scottish eagles are well known, but also from the Western Sahara, and then through the mountains and the steppes and the savannas of Eurasia. And in North America, there's a relatively small, perhaps relic population of migratory golden eagles that breeds up in Ungava here. But probably 95% of North America's eagles are in the west. The golden eagle is really a western bird, but throughout the world they are birds of wilderness. They're wonderful symbols of wilderness. They breed in the alpine, in the mountain chains, the great mountain chains of the world, like the Alps, where their range is incredibly fragmented. This does represent it, but through the Atlas Mountains, the Carpathians, the Himalaya, etc., etc., and in North America, the two main migration routes are through the Rockies and through the Appalachians. And the first record of migratory golden eagles in the European literature was David Thompson. My vote for the greatest Canadian. Greater even than Don Cherry. Hard to believe.
Has the same suit.
He
has the same suit.
Maybe he's a reincarnation. Oh, horrible thought. But David Thompson mapped this huge area for the Northwest Company and later Hudson Bay. And in year 1800, so still the very end of the 17th century, he recorded in his diary Stony Indians catching golden eagles, as part of their initiation ceremonies and for their feathers. And this was in the Upper Bow Valley. So that was the first time that it enters into the English language literature. But obviously the First Nations were very much aware of this bird for a very, very long time, perhaps 10,000 years. It's such an intimate and important part of their culture. And Well, it's interesting, and I got this from David Thompson's journals, and I hadn't realised this, that Muzukism is the eagle moon. It's March, and as we see, March is the ultimate migration month. This is when all the birds come. It can be more than coincidence. This is the eagle month, the eagle moon, and it's also the first month of the Cree calendar. This is when the year begins, and it's the same with us. You know, January the 1st is a horrible day. You know, it's still got hangovers from Christmas, and it's miserable and nothing to do. And it's when the eagles come back that we come to life. This is when life comes back into North America. It's very, very visceral, and we'll see the importance of March later on. And here's Sika visiting our site in the Kananaskis, and we try to reconnect. I mean, it sounds pompous, but they have been disconnected with their culture because of residential schools and general cultural elimination of customs and languages. And there was one time I was working with the rediscovery people, which helps troubled native youth, and they came up to the site, and as luck or fate would have it, there was about 200 golden eagles came up over while they were there, and there was one young lady, I think she was from one of the interior BC nations, couldn't leave. I mean, she was transfixed. There was incredible power, and she had to be gently led away to the bus that was waiting. It's very strong medicine indeed. But we weren't the first people to start studying golden eagles. Our main achievement was to join the DOTS. But as far back as 1976, people in Utah started doing regular raptor studies, and produced almost 900 golden eagles. It was 10% of their count. And then Fred Tilley, who I'm still in contact with, he still works down in Montana, started doing regular counts and had single-day counts of 100 golden eagles down there, but drew no real conclusions from it. And then he also started a spring count. And then a very important paper by Bill Beebe in 1974 makes the statement, a major flight of golden eagles moves along the eastern front of the Rocky Mountains from central Alberta to Mexico in the fall. And he stated that the flight appears in fall and disappears in spring at about the latitude of Calgary. I wonder where to go. And presume that the birds are of Arctic, subarctic behavior. Now, a lot of this, he offered no evidence at all, but a lot of the evidence of the numbers was from bounty returns, especially in BC. And that bounty existed till about the 1960s. And this may be a good place to mention that this year is the year of the bird. Now, every year is the year of the bird. Every day is the day of the bird. But it's the year of the bird because it's the 100th anniversary of the International Migratory Bird Convention between the United States and Canada. Wonderful, and it has been very effective, except that it specifically excludes birds of prey. Because at that time, and until very recently, they were regarded as vermin and could be trapped and poisoned and shot at will. And it was only a couple of decades ago that in Montana there was a state service where ranchers could call up helicopter gunships to shoot eagles from the sky. And this is also why conservation of these birds is more difficult, because being outside of the convention, they are the responsibility of states and provinces. And for a bird that migrates over maybe 7 states and a couple of provinces and territories, each of which have different rules and regulations, it makes actual conservation more difficult. But we are more enlightened now. Hasn't stopped us killing them in new and exciting ways, but we worry about it a bit more now, so that's all right. Oops. And a very important predecessor was Wayne Smith, a good friend of mine who started watching at Windy Point, and there he is. And this is why we study eagles, because all biologists become intimately associated with the thing that they study. And if you're going to be associated with something, an eagle, you're perched up in the tree, searching for prey. And there's Wayne being presented with an honorary membership in our group. It looks like a reunion of ZZ Top, just eagle watchers. But Wayne he's a foothill site and used to get sporadic good golden eagle movement. Nothing systematic. It was very sporadic. It was a little bit too far to the east. But the really important one was Mary Gartshaw, Jeff Holroyd, and John Woods of the Canadian Wildlife Service, who actually saw 246 golden eagles on March the 15th, 1987. And then the following, the 246 and then 150 the next day. This was it. This was the big one. But nearly all the observations in the past have been golden eagles in the foothills between the mountain front and Calgary. And so strong was this model that they assumed that these birds had been forced into the mountains against their will by bad weather, and they walked away from it. In fact, this was the first good record, and they didn't follow it up. And the couple of statements that sort of summarised what the general idea of golden eagle migration was prior to the early 1990s. This is one of the best bird books ever written. It's Pete Dunn, Dave Sibley and Clay Sutton's Hawks in Flight. Terrible illustrations, fuzzy black and white things, but the descriptions of the bird's flight are superb. The words are superb, and a word is worth 1,000 pictures. But they make the statement, because of the abundance of ridges that run along a north-south axis, this is in the Rocky Mountains, western eagle migration is diffuse. No single migratory vantage point is known to be best. This was the idea. They were sort of higgledy-piggledy all over the place. And this is even more remarkable. This was, again, Jeff Holroyd and Kevin Van Teegen, both very fine field biologists. But this was a summary of everything that was known about the Banff and Jasper National Parks after about 100 years of their existence. And they can make the statement that spring migration is during April and May, when it's almost over by then. Peak migration is early April, no. Maximum recorded count is 4 on the 7th and 8th of March at Cairn Pass. 4! Whoop! I hope they recounted carefully. Seems almost unbelievable, but for the wrong reason. And then autumn is from September until mid-November, which is pretty good. Peak migration early mid-October, but maximum recorded count is 9 on the 12th of October. This is after 100 years they managed to see 4 birds in a day. And the reality is that twice a year through both of those parks, something in the order of 6,000 golden eagles migrate. And in Banff, they're probably 10 minutes from Banff town site, and in Jasper, about 5 minutes from Jasper town site. And nobody noticed them. And which is not really surprising about parks. It's rather an indictment. And I mentioned asked for submission for the Bow Valley study, and saying, pointed out what the reality was, as we'll see in a few minutes. Is it possible to miss all these, some of the biggest birds in North America, travelling at up to 200 birds an hour, and over 1,000 a day on occasion? Is it just possible you might be missing a few other things? Let alone the ecology of it. Our parks are not, as they should be, laboratories. They are not places where they're studied so we understand the ecology. They're playgrounds, they're shopping centres. hills, they're ski hills, they're fun fairs, Disneylands, get the idea. So this is what we thought we knew about it, and all the data pointed to this, except for a few exceptions which were regarded as anomalies. The migration was essentially to the foothills and the high plains, that is, between the mountain front and Calgary. Relatively few birds were involved, maybe a few hundred. Some years there were almost no records of golden eagles from the Calgary Field naturalists, for example. The migration period was short, as it said in the Parks report, April and May. Well, by that time, probably 2/3 of the golden eagles had gone north. But mainly immature birds were involved because they migrate late in the spring. So it was believed that those birds that migrated were mainly just young birds, that the adults stayed still. And that these birds were seen feeding and staging, mainly young birds, and that it was leisurely. So it all added up to short-range migration. And when I started speculating about very long-range migration to Alaska and the Yukon, people thought I was totally bonkers. Well, they were right, but not for that reason. So it all started with Des Allen, who was also a retired geologist, and he was studying a candidate natural area in the Kananaskis called Mount Lorette. And I was having tea with him one day and asked him about his project. He was the warden up there, and he's mainly working in botany and had a huge list of vascular and non-vascular plants. It was very impressive, a whole salad bar of them. And I asked him how many birds he'd seen. He'd been out there for a couple of years. He said, oh, about 32. And my face must have sort of fallen and thought, well, how many do you think there should be? I said, about 150 maybe species. So I started helping him. I was there for the whole year. We went up and found new birds every time. And then on about midday or about 11 o'clock in the morning on what was that, the 20th of March 1992, I heard a pine grosbeak sing. It wasn't actually that one. It's got the idea. Of artistic license. And a beautiful song, beautiful bird. So I put my binoculars up to look for it and saw it, but there beyond it, in the air, was a golden eagle. Again, not that particular. But there was this micro dot up in the middle of the valley, circling around over Mount Lorette, that rather attractive piece of rock there, which we had spent an enormous amount of time looking at. It's a nice piece of rock. And so out comes the notebook. I have my notebook here. I'm up to almost 200 of them now, but I was only up to about 30 at that time. And of course, we have already got a model. We knew that they had bred, and there was a nest on Mount Lorette round about there. So this is one of the birds back. Good, wonderful. And when we were having lunch, we looked up and there were two birds up there. Ah, it must be the pair. And as we looked, a bird came across the mountain from the Fisher Range and joined the two, and they quite happily soared together and moved on. I was like, well, that's weird. Because in the breeding season, two's company, three's a fight. And these birds were just moving on. So we started looking up at the Fisher Range in Mount Lorette, and every time we looked up, we were still continuing doing our survey. We had our protocols. But every time we looked up, we saw golden eagles, and they were all doing the same thing. And I thought, well, this is more than coincidence. So the birds were moving along the Fisher Range here. So you see all these eagles? Actually, this is good old slide. These are just dirt on the slide. But you get the point. Yeah. And actually, we have some really old telescopes at the site which are pockmarked, and they've got little spots on them. And on slow days, we get people look at those eagles. Really good. Usually they're real eagles to see. But the birds were moving at ridge level along here, crossing over the Kananaskis Valley in a straight line with the geology, going over to Mount Lorette and onto Mount McGillivray, and then off to the northwest. And this is the Kananaskis Valley here, the Bow Valley. And I actually took this photograph on the way to an intergovernmental conference in Papua New Guinea probably the best thing I got out of the whole meeting. Actually a clear day over the front ranges. But this is the Fisher Range here. Here's Mount Lorette. This is Mount Allen before the Olympic clear cuts were made. And just disappearing into this. And this is a road. This is like looking at an elevated, rather rocky prairie road where it just disappears in a straight line. This turned out to be the highway. And what struck us was that the birds didn't do any of this vulgar flapping thing. That's very infra-dig for eagles. It was all passive flight. And this is the same bird here. But on a calm day, the birds will soar up, spreading their wings, spreading their tail, getting as much surface area to get rising thermals. And when they get to the top, they change their geometry. They close their primary feathers. The tail feathers are actually stacked one on top of the other. It's like a needle-tailed swift. And they go into a tuck like a skier. And they go into a very low angle dive and use gravity. But on windy days, and occasionally we get the odd breeze up in the front ranges. It's one of the windiest places on the planet. And so the winds are prevailing from the southwest there, and they hit the northwest, southeast mountains at 90 degrees and give a completely continuous cushion of rising air. And the birds just ride this, and if they need to get height, they just turn 90 degrees, go up like a kite or speed elevator, turn 90 degrees, and they're 200 or 300 meters higher, and they can't carry on gliding. So there's no flapping. It's an incredibly efficient mode of transport. They're all frequent flyers. They never buy tickets. And this is what we do. As we always say, we are outstanding in our field. And here we are, outstanding in our field. Here's a chap here in transitional pelage. Just beginning to get winter there. It starts on the bottom and gradually moves. Here's George. These were the days when the zoo, George was in the animal hospital at the zoo, and the zoo used to do a lot of rehabilitation. Now they give it over to you guys. But he was rehabilitating this juvenile female golden eagle, which he subsequently took up to be released at Lorette. And here are other people looking here. Here's Bill Wilson, who's been with the project George and Bill have been with the project for really almost from the beginning, 24 years, 25 years. Incredible dedication. Bill's already been out, George has been out, I was talking to him a couple of days ago. Bill was just retired as an astrophysicist at the University of Calgary, and he's a very useful addition to the team because he doesn't need any sleep or food or anything. He just does it. He just does it. He's quite regular. And then we have large numbers of people out watching. I mean, there's generally several thousand people come out to the site. It's very easy to find. We have a website called eaglewatch.ca, which has daily reports. It also has maps of how to get to the site. Lots of room there, and come out, dress warmly, bring some buns to feed to the observers, and binoculars, because these birds are high, and enjoy it, and especially on days like this. And there is actually a subtle correlation between ambient temperature and the number of people at the site. We are working on mathematical models to try and figure this out at the moment. And that chap is actually me in a previous incarnation. And so it started, March the 20th. First golden eagle was seen at 11:30. At the end of the day, Des and I had counted over 100 golden eagles. And I'd just come back from managing a $50 million gas development project in Jordan. And of course, as I said, I was watching this fantastic raptor migration through the Dead Sea Rift. And what I was seeing was not the same magnitude, but the the same volition, the same non-randomness. So all the way back, Des was writing, I was burbling and bubbling about this is interesting, this is not random, it's not stochastic, it's worth studying, blah, blah, blah. So I hijacked a field trip that I was supposed to be leading, and 2 days later we went up to the same place, testing theory, and we saw 247 golden eagles in an afternoon. And I continued going up there. I was actually doing some consulting at the time. There's only one thing worse than being unemployed, and that is having a job. It really does get in the way of it. And I never saw those numbers again, but under all sorts of different weather conditions, birds were still moving. And we ended up with 386 golden eagles, which is, in those days, wow, there's a lot of golden eagles. And then in the fall, decided to go back. I got rid of all the encumbrances, jobs and contracts, and decided to go up there and spent 33 days, which seemed a lot of time at the time. That's only quarter time work now, between September the 1st and November the 4th, and we saw 3 southbound golden eagles on September the 18th, going the other way, doing exactly the same thing but in reverse. Mountain Red over to the Fisher Range. And then we had a final count of 2,661 migrant raptors, of which over 2,000 were golden eagles. By this time I was corresponding, talking to Wayne every night, and we were comparing numbers, and I had a single day count of 476. I was really pleased about this, and I said, Wayne, you won't believe this. He said, well, what? And he said, well, I had 666 today. And then this translated was, well done, Wayne, I'm really happy for you. You would be on nothing if not competitive. Anyway, the conclusion was, well, maybe we missed a few in the spring. So, next spring comes, we start for the Eagle Moon and start counting. And, we started at the beginning of, March the 2nd. And we counted for 43 days. It was mainly me with a few other people coming up and helping at that time. And we ended up with over 4,400 migrants, of which 4,124 were golden eagles. Wow! Take that, Banff National Park, with your 4 a day. Because on the 24th, we got almost 500 golden eagles. And the next day, we had 849 golden eagles. Well, by this time, I had some chaps situated over in the Bow Valley, because we were starting to map where these things were coming from and going to. We didn't stand still. And as we do now, we take meticulous notes of the time of every single bird, and we compared the notes, and they weren't the same birds. It was a slightly different population. And we estimated between 11 and 1,200 golden eagles went through on that one day. Enormous numbers, which nobody was aware of. So, we started, I got on the telephone, and it's amazing how those sort of numbers spur people's enthusiasm. And really this is where the citizen science thing started. We had people going out in 11 sites in the spring and reporting back, all the way from Cardston, Crowsnest Pass, Livingston Range, Old Man Gap, all the way up to Lake Minnewanka. And they were reporting back, we saw 50, we saw, we just predicted the route, they went there, and all of a sudden, by looking up in the air, they found it. We're sort of terrestrial apes that walk around looking at our shoelaces most of the time. But we should look up in a real and also a metaphorical sense. Because birds have wings and they fly, which is an amazing revelation to most people. And so this is just, don't expect you, there will be a test on this. But we had 10 days, 156 birds, etc., lots and lots of people. Some just a day, but they all found something, birds crossing here, crossing there. And a lot of these people are still in the business, they're still watching even today. It's very addictive. And here's some more here. Doug and Teresa were up helping me at my new site down in southwest Alberta. 2 days ago. They're still active. It's one of the world's truly addictive occupations, and one of the healthiest as well. If you're going to be addicted, this is the one. But we quickly realised that we weren't seeing all the birds, because the Fisher Range has 2 arms, and there's also birds moving over the Kananaskis Range over to the west. Now we can see that, we can see the western arm of the Fisher Range, but even with really good glasses you can't see through the mountain to see the birds moving up over this route here. And this is Barrier Lake, here's the Bow Valley again, and the University of Calgary Research Station is just behind there. And there is another arm of the migration that goes right over that biological research station. They've never noticed anything either. So in the fall of 1994, Roger Dunn, who unfortunately died a number of years ago, and a bunch of volunteers went over to Barrier Lake and started counting birds on this other route and ignoring anything that we would have seen. And between the 2 of us, at Mount Lorette we counted just under 4,000, they counted almost 2,200. So here, just 2 years after the discovery, we can now demonstrate the movement of over 6,000 birds. So that 4 birds is looking a bit thin. Okay, but it raised the question, where do we go for one-stop shopping to see 6,000 golden eagles? El Dorado, the golden one. There we are. This was the challenge. But we didn't have any money, and we quite liked the Kananaskis. We were comfortable there, despite the boring weather. And but George is a bit more peripatetic. He went exploring, and he found that Plateau Mountain was a good place for birds. And this is Plateau Mountain taken from the road over from Nanton over to the Chain Lakes, and doing that. You can see why it's called Plateau Mountain. It's like a billiard table. And this is what it looks like at the top. Not a lot of shelter. It can be pretty nasty. And there's George again with his eagle. So he's trying to carry him away, I think. But here's Mount Lorette here, here's Plateau Mountain, which is about 90 kilometers as an eagle flies to the south. And so we spent the fall of 1997 up there. We initially just slept out on the Alpine tundra, and then actually Eric and Rosemary lent us a motorhome, and which is luxury beyond the dreams of avarice. It was amazing, except when the winds blew. And I remember Des being up there one night because we took shifts because it's quite remote, and he abandoned ship. He thought it was going to be blown over, fleeing. But we got just under 4,000 again, which is exactly what the trend would have been predicted for Mount Lorette. So this was not El Dorado. There was obviously still 2 streams of birds there, but it was fun, and it was a change of scene. But it's a great place. If you want to do raptor photography, it is the place to go, because the birds, you're up high, you're up at over 2,000 meters, and the birds are coming low across the ridges. I've taken National Geographic photographers up there, and these are Peter Perrins, as a photographer out of Banff, and these are golden eagles. You can see giving the photographer the hairy eyeball there. And here's a northern goshawk having a go at ravens. And the chances are that 2 seconds later the tables were turned and the ravens were having a go back. But you can see that they're just absolutely magnificent birds. A good place to go just to enjoy the birds. But here's Doug and Teresa again. As they were out with me a couple of days ago, and This time they were working at the University of Lethbridge. Teresa in the biology department, and Doug was professor of chemistry there. And they spent 1 or 2 days every fall going out to the southern end of the Livingston Range near Frank in the Crow's Nest Pass. And they were getting fairly good numbers of birds, nothing super spectacular, but they were there. But in this particular year, which is 2000, we had a very slow moving and slow build-up movement of golden eagles. And you see at Mount Lorette 195, 436, 404, 327, etc. Wayne at the Sheep River had 420, 297. George at Plateau Mountain, 534. So you can see that these numbers were building up. So I got on the phone to Doug and Teresa and said, get out to that site. I think you might see a few birds. Which they duly did and reported almost 1,100 golden eagles. And they didn't get there till about 10:30 in the morning. We usually start at first light. So really huge. They were just totally overwhelmed. They just counted the birds and they couldn't do much else with it. So this looked like a pretty good candidate for El Dorado. But how to get down there, didn't have any money and me moving, etc., etc. And so here we are. And we subsequently named it Bita Ishtaka, which is Bikani Blackfoot for the place of the eagles. We found that it was actually a traditional place for the eagles, and we actually had that name published in a National Geographic map. It's one of the very few places that actually has a native name, which is one of the great sadnesses. There are very few real names here. But anyway, that's another story. And this is where we were. This is the Livingston Range, this enormous blade of rock. It literally is a fin. And it's the extreme southern end of the Front Ranges, which start way up, almost at the Territory-British Columbia border, where there's maybe 7 or 8 ridges, and it's a huge funnel that comes down. Just north of the Bow River, there's 3 ridges, and at Mount Lorette, as I said, there are 2. Plateau Mountain, there are 2, but here there's just 1. And the idea was that we would get all the birds, all the foothill birds that Wayne saw at Windy Point, and all the golden eagles that we saw at those 2 sites in the Kamouraskis. This was the theory. And this is what it looks like from the top. My younger son he teaches at Mount Royal University and teaches this sort of stuff and takes his students up and they dig holes, and if they're alive in the morning, they're passed. And if they're not, they get to take it again next year. So, but you can see that it's disjunct. These are the main ranges. Here, this is the High Rock Range, and leading down into the Flathead Range. But it's just this ridge of rock and basically foothill type topography on either side. So this was where we hoped to find El Dorado. And this is what it's like from the top. It's up at about 1900 meters. It's about 1,000 foot, 300 meter climb every day. Get incredibly fit doing those treks. And this is the weather that we get down there. These are palm trees, and occasionally we get the odd breeze there, but nothing. 230 kilometers an hour or so, and rainbows and unicorns, all the usual things. A beautiful spot, and this is looking north along this blade of rock, and this is looking south towards. This is Chief Mountain in northern Montana, and these are the late Proterozoic block mountains of the Waterton Range. And this is literally the end of the Front Ranges. Once you get over here, these are foothills ridges. They're not the mid-Paleozoic top of the Front Ranges. They disappear. This is the last best south, and everything becomes diffuse beyond here. And some more views. This is Getty's Folly, the Three Rivers Reservoir. It benefited, I think, 5 ranches. Still provides good water birds. And this is the view over to the Porcupine Hills. You can see forever on a clear day, which it really is. And this is looking over towards the High Rock Range here. And members of the Crow's Pass Conservation Society, the bird group, lots of people came out to help. We made the great trek up onto the top of the hill. And this is what we found. We did four counts there. And these were full counts from about the 25th of August, every day, first light to last light, to about the 12th of December. Good numbers, 95 days, 100 days, 84 days, over 1,000 hours in general. And if you look at the golden eagles, 4,400, 5,445, 5,200, etc. That was El Dorado. This was it. But look at the other birds. We get very relatively few non-golden eagle species at Mount Red, apart from bald eagles. But look at some of these total numbers, and these are spring counts as well. We did 3 spring counts, but a total of over 27,000 golden eagles in just 7 counts. Broad 5,000 sharp-shinned hawks, peregrine falcons, 35, 48 peregrine falcons, and they're right up and coming right at you, right up among the birds. And on a busy day, it's like looking into a snowstorm in a car. The birds are coming right at you. And early in the morning, you're looking down at them. You shouldn't really look down on the eagles, but physically, they're coming below the ridge. It's a wonderful place. So this was El Dorado. And as a result, I moved down to southwest Alberta, where I'm still there and still working on various problems down there. And these are just some of the birds. It's not about identification, but who's that ferruginous hawk? And just fabulous breeding for ferruginous hawks this year. You see young ferruginous hawks all over the place for about a month before the migration. Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, bald eagles, rough-legged hawks, which are already coming back. These are the winter hawks. I had 9 in 1.5 hours yesterday on migration down. They suddenly appeared ahead of this bad weather system. They tell you about the weather. But we also record everything else, all the mammals, all the birds, butterflies, human beings, everything. If you go up there, you'll be in the notebook. And it's a wonderful place. We have dusky grass displaying in the spring up there. We have Townsend solitaires doing their parachute song like skylarks. Absolutely amazing. We saw all sorts of rare birds, bighorn sheep, 13-line ground squirrels. Not terribly exciting, except that it's about 200 metres higher than it's ever been recorded before. And it hibernated there, and it bred there. Nobody knew that. And these are turkeys. First time turkeys had ever been seen up at about 2,000 metres. And they're migrating, they're going south. Not the fastest, but they're on their way. So, but other things. The swifts are incredibly rare in Alberta. All the species are rare because they're very high up, and it takes people spending 1,000 hours looking at the sky to see them. But we have all 4 species of Canada's swift in 1 year there, including the only ever record of chimney swift. And it actually occurred in the spring on the exact average first arrival date of the nearest breeding colony in Manitoba. And even more remarkable were the songbirds. I mean, we were way up on the top of a blade of rock, but we're in the first forested bit. And birds would come in overnight, following the lineament of the mountains, and they would start dropping down into the trees to feed, having travelled overnight. And so, has anybody been to Point P? Good, and you know that phenomenon, first in the morning they're coming over the lake and they're dropping down, it rains warblers and vireos and tanagers and things. Not as big as that, but surprising numbers of birds up at 1900 metres. And some of these very rare orange-crowned McGillivray's, red-start, Cape May warbler, magnolia, black Burnian warbler, black-poll warbler. No, these are easterly birds, and boreal forest birds. And most remarkable were these things, little red-breasted nuthatch. And up to 3,069 birds migrating in one fall. And it was genuine migration. And it was fascinating because there was one big tree at the end near where we were. And the birds would come down and over about 10 minutes it would fill up with nuthatches. And when at a certain point they all went and all went off together. And then the tree would fill up again and then poof, and then another burst. And then there'd be Sharpshire hawks and merlins waiting. And it sort of became a fast food outlet. Even McDonald's. But quite fascinating. And think real rarities like chestnut-backed chickadees, pygmy nuthatch, grey-cheeked thrush, grasshopper sparrow. What the hell is that doing up there? But and we've found also now I've been doing detailed avian studies down there. Instead of looking in the river valleys for migrants, we go up on the hills and we find an enormous variety of things up there. And nobody's ever thought of looking for songbirds up at the top of mountains. It's amazing what you see when you look. And I've got another talk which I'm going to give tomorrow, but I've been doing a detailed inventory of the birds of the Beaver Mines area, which is where I live. And in about 5 or 6 years, I've seen 316 species of bird, which is enormous. And maybe 6 or 7 new to the province, including things like long-toed stint. About 3 weeks ago, I got the first eastern yellow wagtail, one of the very first documented record away from the Alaska coast or the California coast. It's a Siberian bird. With a lot of Siberian birds there, like the stint, the wagtail, slaty-backed gull, what else? Brambling. We're beginning to think that the Russians are infiltrating our bird ornithology. We need a judicial committee doing that. But here we are. You can also watch from the bottom. You don't have to climb the hill. This is just above the Frank Slide Interpretive Centre. And the birds are moving here. You're actually closer to them here than you are at Mount Lorette. The mountain's a little lower. And each year we used to have a weekend for the public where they didn't have to put in the sweat equity to go up on the mountains. And so this is at the end of 2016, our 25th year, and now we've had more, but we've now counted something in the order of all our sites. This is at Mount Lorette, Plateau Mountain, South Livingston, Steeples, which is over in BC. We have a site there observing the movement on the western banks of the Rockies. Vicky Ridge, which is where I'm counting at the moment. Beaver Mines, which is from my house. And now we've seen close to, what are the numbers here? Close to 250,000 migratory birds of prey, of which about almost 200,000 have been golden eagles. And it's taken us something like almost 5,000 man-sight days to do that, at an average of just under 10 hours a day. This is an enormous effort, and is probably the biggest single citizen science program ever conducted in Canada. And it all happened by accident, really. There was no design, like all good things in life. It was a happy accident. And just some of the statistics, not really boring, but somewhat boring. But these are and when you think back to what was believed to be the case, these are the cumulative counts at the end of when we did full counts at Mount Lorette. After I went down to the south, they started doing shorter counts, and we now do a standard count in the spring from the 1st of March through to the 22nd of April, and in the fall from the 20th of September through to the 15th of March. But these were complete counts because we were looking at when they started, when they ended. And we used to start beginning of early February, not much happening. But then in March, the eagle moon, look at this, huge thing. And these are nearly all adults. And then the tail off with the young birds coming through in April and May. And then in the fall, we started in late August, not much happening. This is why we start on the 20th of September now. And they build up, and then big peaks throughout October, through much of October. This is a narrow peak because they're under gonad power. They have to get up there to breed. In the fall, they're just drifting back. There's no great urgency. And saw birds coming through almost to Christmas. And I did spend one winter doing daily counts down south in the Gladstone Valley. And I watched every day from, I think it was the 25th of November to the first couple of days of February, and saw over 1,000 migratory raptors, mainly rough-legged hawks and bald eagles. They are moving, some years, mild years, they're moving south way into the new year. And a lot of raptors that are seen on Christmas bird counts are not wintering birds, they're still migrants. They're still moving south. And this is the hourly count. I mean, we would have to study a bird that's moving for 7 months of the year and starts at first light and goes into last light. And but there's nothing random about this. They're all negatively skewed normal distribution curves, cumulatively. And this one is in the fall. They build up until late afternoon and drop down. It's quite beautiful statistics. And this is an individual count in a high pressure system. And again, it's not random. This is exactly the same mathematics as a drill cent test or a bouncing ball or when you turn a hose pipe off. It's a diminishing pressure system. So each one of these, it's a geometric ratio here. And you could actually, to this point, I predicted how many birds would come through. But this is an ideal year where it's not being interrupted by weather systems. And again, it all looks higgledy-piggledy, but there are some beautiful things happening there mathematically. And we often assess the efficacy of a count by does it reflect this? And does it give a nice negative skew? Because sometimes, because of the weather or other things, it doesn't make any sense at all. You can actually now predict this. Move on. But other fascinating things. This was the first few years, throw that rubbish out. But I started corresponding with a researcher up in Denali National Park in Alaska, Carol McIntyre, who was studying the population of 80 or so pairs of golden eagles. And she was counting the number of birds fledged. And this is this green line here on this scale. And this is the ratio of immature to adult birds that we counted at Mount Lorette. And you can see there's a complete parallelism there. You know, we could, in fact, we used to do this every year. I would phone her up and say, I think you produced X number of juveniles, and it was accurate to about 5%. But you see a rising one, down and up. And again, this is probably the snowshoe hare cycle. Snowshoe hares breed in one single population across the whole of the boreal, from the Gulf of Alaska right the way across to the east. And about every 10 or 11 years, the population it doubles every year, and they outconsume the vegetation, various viral diseases go through, and they crash. So going back to that first thing about the presentation of food, so when the birds are at their, when the rabbit or hare population is at maximum, there are rabbits everywhere. And the male closes its eyes and comes back to, oh, cheering, let's breed. And they do. And almost every one of those pairs produce one young. occasionally 2. And then a couple of years later, in Alaska, they produced 5 out of a population of 80. It's very, very dramatic. And this is Denali here. Again, my hearty younger son was doing mountain rescue on the largest mountain in Alaska. But it's a nice photograph because you almost never see Denali. It's always in cloud. And let's see, this is, so we do this in spring and fall. Here's that last chart. This is extended. Here's the peak, second peak, coming up to a third peak, which was actually, I haven't put this on yet, but that was last fall. We had huge numbers, and this year already we're seeing a significant diminution in the number of juveniles. Up, down, up, down, up, down, and we get a sort of reflection of that in the spring with lower numbers. And this has various implications. This has been going on for a very, very long time, and it's perfectly natural. But it means that if this population is under stress, which we believe it is, because we are losing a lot of birds in the winter, they can't suddenly make up the numbers. The breeding strategy does not allow it. So in maybe a 10-year period, a pair of birds, on average, may only raise 4 or 5 young. Now they're long-lived, but we seem to be losing more than are sustainable now, and the population may be going down. I'll talk about that. These are the crude numbers. It's a bit of a ski slope. When we first started in the spring, and there were only a few of us with really awful optics, basically sort of upgraded Coke bottles held together with duct tape. But now we've all got Swarovskis and all sorts of wonderful things. You can see Banff and not great. But we were still getting over 4,000 birds, and this is the general trend, which is reflected in the fall. It's also reflected in the counts in Montana, which is the other place where they're doing a lot of work. We spurred a lot of interest down there, and they're doing really good work now, serious work. And we've now got 2 research students from the University of Victoria, statisticians, doing a master's on 25 years of data to test the validity of this hypothesis. Because these birds are breeding up in the Arctic, as we'll see from some telemetry data. It's the fastest changing area with regard to climate on the planet. And we are going to see any disruption. It may actually improve. We don't know. But we now have a 25-year baseline. And so the second 25 years is to see just how this is going to play out. Once we've got a solid, statistically significant baseline, it's taken us 25 years to do that, then we can see what will play out in the end. We will see what happens if we survive ourselves. So this is the whole picture. It's something I drafted a number of years ago for Canadian Geographic. This is the breeding territory of this population. There are 2 movements, and actually the split is further down here. We now know some of the birds winter in the Intermountain Basin. A lot of them go down into Big Bend of Texas and down into Mexico. So all of this, and this was before we had telemetry data. This was just based on observation. But it started out with 1 bird seen at 11 o'clock on March the 20th, 1992. And now here we have half a continent of dynamism. But as a result of our work, Carol McIntyre started doing telemetry on birds. And somewhat later, a friend of mine, Rob Dominic, and this is Rob here, that's the eagle, don't mistake them, they're very similar, similar coloration. He's been doing telemetry on birds captured in the Greater Yellowstone system, and then tracking them up north. And most of these are breeding in the Brooks range in northern Alaska. And here you see there's Kramer and Elaine. Remember Kramer and Elaine? They're right up there breathing in that. Who knew? You always suspected there was something going on. But this doesn't have a happy ending because Elaine, after we followed her on a daily basis, I was reporting it in our blog, and she taught us an incredible amount. Her greatest achievement was to go from the BC border down into Montana in about 2 days. Just incredible. Under ideal conditions, they do move. But Elaine was captured, caught in a leg hold trap, set for coyotes or wolves in Montana, and died. And she was one of, I think, 6 golden eagles that died in that area through leg hold traps that year. And Kramer had just gone back. 2 days later, he was shot by a native person up there. So it's a rough old world. And in fact, all the birds from his first tranche of telemetry birds died within the first 3 or 4 years. One was killed by a truck on Pine Pass, and a friend of mine, who's the physician up at Tumbler Ridge, I said, well, we've got the coordinates. I have a challenge for you if you wish to accept it. Find the transmitter. And he did. They waded across the Pine River and they found it. But it doesn't order well. But this is the whole system.
Wow.
This is, Big Bend down here. This is going way down. But look at this concentration. You get the odd bird that has its own ideas. Eagles are independent-minded creatures. They're not going to follow a map. But most of them go up there. It's a well-trodden path. And we are somewhere around here. We're in here. You see this? And here's a simulation. It's almost a pseudo heat map. But this gives the intensity of migration. It's rather clever, actually. And look at this. A red hot area through here. This is where we've been working. And it sort of fades off either way. The odd one wandering all over the place. Generally juveniles. And another little idea that I have, I'm a paleontologist by training and trade for a long time. Amongst other things, I've worn many hats. But I'm always interested in how systems develop. Why do a certain percentage, you don't know how many, maybe 30, 40% of the birds don't migrate at all, and a large number, 6,000, migrate all the way from here all the way down. And I think it all goes back to the end of the Pleistocene, the last Wisconsin ice event, where the North, Thuringia, was a huge ice-free area, all the way from the Urals, all the way down into the Northwest Territories, Yukon and Alaska. No ice there. Human beings were living up here 20,000 years ago in Old Crow. Huge numbers of elephantoids, mammoths, mastodons, all the animals that we recognize today, plus giant ground sloths, huge amounts of meat. And there would be golden eagles up here as well. Then you have this enormous barrier of ice, where you have the Laurentian ice fusing with the Cordilleran ice here, and this only started breaking down about 11,000, 12,000 years ago. And down here you would have golden eagles as well, that came in, shall we say, about 250,000 years ago. They are Asiatic European birds, old world birds. But there was an influx, and we know this from the fossil record at La Brea and various other places. And so these would have been stuck below the ice. And these two populations would be separated for maybe 10, 15, 20,000 years. And these birds would be sedentary, and these birds probably wouldn't migrate over this ice mass. But then as this corridor opens up, birds probably started wintering further and further south, and till they broke through to this enormous meat factory of the Great Plains, one of the most complex and productive ecosystems in the world, which we have totally destroyed in 150 years. Nothing left, really. Now, but this would have been more than meat that we could shake a talon at. So why didn't they stay there? Well, all the breeding niches were occupied. And so they would, and raptors, unlike human beings, they don't keep piling on until everything collapses. It's breeding substrates that limits their breeding population. And once those are filled, then they don't fill in. They can only support a certain amount within a home range. So these birds would go back up into Beringia and breed there. And why not? 24 hours of daylight, lots of ground squirrels, lots of carrion from caribou, grizzly bear and kills, etc., etc. So we started doing a genetic study using some of Rob's blood samples, not his blood samples, he was collecting to study lead in their diet, which is a serious problem. They pick up a lot of lead from hunter's shot, and it seriously affects their reproduction potential. And we started looking at it. We were looking for a migratory gene. We ran out of money. We hoped to start it again, but it's very expensive to do this sort of thing. And we didn't really have enough sedentary samples. Most of our samples were from migratory birds because that's what he was capturing. Anyway, it's an interesting idea. So not only are we now thinking about half a continent of migration, we're thinking about 10, 15,000 years ago. It's amazing where it goes. And then down to beaver mines, which is where I now live. And this is Vicky Ridge, where I've been counting since the 20th of September. We already had 650 birds through. Huge numbers of birds there. And then in the spring, now I had a silly sort of heart attack thing a couple of years ago. I didn't want to climb mountains. So I started watching from my house. This is my house. And this thing here. What I discovered was in the spring there's a huge raptor migration going right over my house. And I hadn't noticed it because I was standing up freezing my house. So now I sit there, this is my thing, and cup of tea, cup of coffee, maybe a small sherry or port in the afternoon. and this is where Vance, he teaches philosophy at the University of the Rockies. He's actually a Stoic, which is perfect philosophy for raptor watchers. That's all of that. And here's some of the numbers. Counted over 2,037 looking out of my window. Very large number. Got over 1,000 golden eagles. Good stuff. As I say, I now have the Guinness record for the number of migratory raptors seen from a bedroom. I could actually stay in bed and watch them. Doesn't quite have the same cachet. And this is Vicky Ridge. And this was last year. Over 4,000. This is more than they have at Monterey. And again, it's very easy. It's a 10-minute walk. It's only 5 minutes drive from my house. It's a 15-minute walk up onto the ridge. And the birds are going through really good variety of birds. Look at this, 550 rough-legged hawks in one count. It's a superb variety of birds. And this is the view from the top looking over to the Flathead Range here. It's a high foothills ridge. So lots of exciting things, and it's all there to be seen. You're more than welcome to join me at any time. And here, the end of the first 25 years, beginning of the second. 25 years and counting, as I call that. We're still counting, and I don't know, we'll sustain it as long as we can. Like yourselves, we are cash strapped, we're running out of money. It does take a lot to support this, keeping people in the field for the moment about 6 months of the year. But we do have a foundation, and where's Ed? Oh, there's Ed. Ed has got some pamphlets there about the foundation. It's $20 for life membership, and then you can come out and breathe the fresh air. You can do that anyway. But we would welcome your support and interest. We also have a website called eaglewatch.ca, and we publish the daily results. So I do that every day. I spend 10, 11 hours in the field. I come home, I have to debrief Vance and whoever's up at Mount Rec, take their notes, then write it up. I usually put the data in the computer, do the variance data, then get up at 5:30, write the blog, post it, then back in the field. And occasionally stop for a sandwich somewhere along the way. So it's interesting, and that's where we are now. We're still outstanding in our field. We hope for another 23 years. I think it might see me out and a lot of us, because one of the problems is our observing forces are aging. You know, limbs are falling off, eyes. But we do have some younger people coming in now. So I see some young people here, young business people, and we will provide training and all the rest of it. And it's a great group of people. As I say, there's got to be something which keeps people doing the same thing year in, year out over 25, 26.